Snowy, miss me? Miss me, Snowy? Miss me?
What's up?
Hello?
What's up, Fleur? How you doing?
Hello?
A clean debate. Shut the fuck
Oh, here we
Let's
go.
have a
Here
nice, linear, and clean debate on moral realism.
More realism? All right, let's go.
Okay, do you have an argument against realism, or do you want me to give an argument for realism?
Can you give an
Just a
argument for realism?
homosexual in the chat.
25 hours of sleepless. Yeah, you give me.
Okay,
I'd
yeah.
tell you. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
feeling nice today. I'm feeling very generous and charitable.
Good.
Yeah. All right. So P1. So I'll just give you a pretty simple argument for realism, okay? P1. If we have perceptions, in the naive realist sense of perceptions, of moral properties, then there are moral facts. The antecedent to P1 is true, therefore the conclusion, right, there are moral facts is true. So what contention, what premise do you have contention with?
The first one was the first one.
If we have perceptions in the naive realist sense of perceptions of moral properties, then there are moral facts. It's pretty simple.
So if we have soft perceptions of moral facts, so it's like naive
Just any
realistic
type of
sense.
perception. Just take like a perception of any type of moral property, then we can conclude that
Okay.
there are moral facts.
So what constitutes it to be a moral property in the first place? Is it going to just be semantical content, descriptive, or prescriptive?
Well, it's obviously going to be contained in just the semantic content.
So so what would
If you're
stop
asking me
me
like what
from?
it means, yeah, obviously the meaning is
Yeah.
going to come from semantic content.
Yeah. So would it just be a descriptor, or would it be a prescriptor? And
What do you
how would you
mean?
get past the Isord gap?
Oh,
So if it was a
well, look,
descriptor, it would just be.
it's gonna be in one way, it's gonna be a descriptor in the sense that, you know, there's gonna be some sensations associated with it in perception, but it's gonna
Mhm.
be a prescriptor in the sense that like that sensation is not gonna be identical to any set of like necessary physical facts, right? It's
Yeah.
just
So,
gonna be
so
like a type of sensation, some type of sensation associated with like a normative demand, right? So
so
if you're just
hmm.
asking me like, it's not going to be clearly in either box. That at least the perception. It's going to be one of those edge cases.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason I'm seeking a motivator. Like, what constitutes its existence? Then is it going to be
Well, look,
inductively
I
verifiable?
can just give kind of ostensive examples, right? Like for
Okay.
example, people learning that what it means for them to be a good father through, for example, seeing another father do an action.
Okay.
That's
So,
one.
but what constitutes that to be a good act exactly? Like, why
Well,
wouldn't
then
I
that's
say
a
that?
separate question, right? Like the question of
Mhm.
whatever constituted to be a good act would just be the properties that you're perceiving in this regards.
Well, the thing is that the perception there, like, if it's described, like you're saying, it's an inductive description, right? So, what if the
Yeah, and
inductive description is
it's
that?
this basically. If you're asking me what the moral properties, are you asking what the moral properties look like? Because the moral properties,
Yeah, like how like.
all well, basically all they look like is they're gonna have the same. They're just gonna have one simple moral look, whatever it looks like when you think that something looks good to you, right? So there's not gonna be
So that's
anything
just
kind of over and
aesthetical
above
preference.
that.
So you're saying it's just an like
So
aesthetic
it's in a
preference,
similar
or?
way like color, right? Like
Hmm.
you're asking me what does color look like? I don't know what looks
Hmm.
like color. Whatever you're seeing red.
Well, the color is going to have like phenomenal properties, right? You can differentiate it it's just going to be descriptive in nature. I'm wondering like where's the
Well,
prescription? Like the
no.
prescription there's doing the
Color
heavy lifting.
obviously has phenomenal properties, and I'm saying, yeah, like there's a phenomenal properties associated with moral properties. There's a moral look, and I'm saying that there's a particular kind of faculty that is laden within the kind of phenomenal quality of moral looks that are just associated with moral talk in general. It's going to be like asking me like, what sound is color, right? Color doesn't have a sound.
Hmm. But prescriptions have they have a normative value, right? So where's that normative value being,
You're
where's
asking
that
what the
emergent from?
motivation
Is
is.
it an emergent property or what? Sorry?
You're asking what the motivation is.
Yeah. What would be the
Okay,
motivator
like
to?
they're just motivated. Look, one, we know that kids when they see things like square pegs and round holes, they think that's kind of wrong, like incorrect, right? And then There's also
Okay.
like other studies and like affordances in psychology, right? If you're asking me what's the normative force there, right? The normative force is going to be
Mhm.
the same type of normative force that we feel whenever we see something like an affordance, right, in nature. So if we ever see, like, for example, like, you ever seen like the like branch of a tree and you thought like, oh, well, that seems like something I could swing off of, or like if you ever see like
Mhm.
the basin in a chair and you thought that you could sit in it, right? And when we see people using those in incorrect ways, we have issues with that. Right? This is the same way
Yeah.
that like moral looks are going to kind of look like, and this is going to be the same way that we're motivated, right? We have some feeling
So
that it's wrong regardless of
yeah,
um,
sure. Couldn't that just be a universal like non-cognitivist stance? Like it's just going to be emotivism. Like people are
no, it's not
evolved
going to be a
to
non-cognitive
do some
stance
kind
because
of.
it's you're asking me if it's emotivism. It's not going to be a cognitive stance because we could say the fact that we're perceiving is distinct from our feeling about it.
Yeah. What is the distinction? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. So what's
Well,
the mind
I think the
independent?
fact that like an apple is red is distinct from my mere sensations of an apple, right? That's why I said it was a naive realist sense of like of perceptions here.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not even trying to ascertain, like, whether it's going to be phenomenally separate. Like, I'm not saying that I'm not asking for like a numinal count for this, right? I'm just saying,
No, there's nothing about
is
Newman.
there?
I don't know why you're bringing up Newman. It's a lot more simple than what I'm describing, right? When I say something,
Yeah.
when you asked me earlier, you were like, "Hey, how exactly is it the case that it has any normative force?" And then I gave you my account, and you
Mhm.
said, "Well, how is that different from an emotivist account?" Right? And I said the
Yeah.
emotivist is different from an emotivist account because while we may have a particular emotion or sensation associated with moral perceptions, those sensations are constituted in some way or another by the 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 actual objects of perception here.
So what are those ways? Like you said, in some ways, what are the ways? Like, how do you?
Well,
I'm just
there might
asking
not
for
be
like
like a hard
heuristics here.
explanation for exactly how, in any case, in every case, exactly how they constitute perception. That's going to be a matter of like scientific study, right, or like natural study.
So
Exactly how
can
they
can
go from
you?
that to constituting perception.
Right. But usually with scientific inquiry is going to constitute like like descriptors, right? Like not prescriptors. I'm
I
trying to
don't know why
ascertain how
you
do you
keep
get.
going to this descriptors and prescriptors thing when when I gave you the account per hour as prescriptive. What you should be skeptical of is that the sciences can actually cause this, like, I guess, approximation of what we mean by the semantics. That's what you should be skeptical of.
I'm skeptical of both. I think the
Well, your
language that's
first,
being
yeah,
used
but
is actually
your
is
reason
going to
for
be
being
stronger.
skeptical of the first one is the second one. That's because you otherwise you're just kind of referring back to your prior reason, which was already dealt with, unless you just don't find it convincing at all.
Right. Yeah. Well,
And that's
I
not
was
my
seeking
job.
motivators because I
I
didn't
laid out
find
my
it like
case,
convincing.
right?
Yeah. Well, I don't seem to. I personally don't see the symmetry between that and emotivism.
Well, look, you asked me how
Whatever
is it
action.
normative. We have cases of
Yeah.
people having perception of moral facts and facts generally associated with normativity, acting on them and having emotions associated with them. Right. And then like, we obviously there are cases of people who perceive things they would call like moral facts, right? And then act on them.
Yeah. Why would that be different to like emotivism or like some kind of commandment
Because
based
I told you the
non-cognitive thing?
reason why it was different because I account for what a perception is here, right, is going to be different from like just the sensation here. But when you have a perception, I think a requirement for you to have perception is to be able to discriminate between entities, right? And
Okay.
I think that perception is externally constituted. That's why it qualified in P1 that it was a naive realist sense of perceptions.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to figure out how would we ascertain that it's like you can flip the script and say whatever you consider to be good is bad and bad is good or
Well, then
neutral, and we
then
actually
you're just having then you're just like having a semantic disagreement. If you're just saying, look, by good is bad and bad is good, I'm just swapping the words. Sure, that's fine, but the content is still the same.
well, what makes the content like is it going to be like some kind of
What makes
universal
the
agreement
contents the
on?
same? Well, I gave you we have a way that we know that the contents are the same. If you're asking me how do we connect between the external
Well, I don't
constituents of
think.
our perception between the
Yeah,
external constituents of our perception
right.
to moral perceptions, then that's a study for the sciences. That's not a study that we can solve now.
So you think scientists can establish prescriptions?
Well, I think sciences can establish the way that we get from the constituents of moral perception to moral
Mhm.
perception, but our knowledge of moral perception, right? Our knowledge is purely gained through perception. It's not gained through the science. Does that make sense? Moral knowledge itself just comes from perception, but like the account of how moral knowledge is constituted, right, by external things, that's going to be established by science.
So we're going to observe a ipso facto thing. Like we're gonna see the action occur, then we're gonna be able to investigate it through perception, and then be able to give a descriptive account of how the prescription is formed through sciences, like through like some experimentation. Is it gonna be like a empirical methodology?
No,
Like how
we
do
would
we do?
just have to find. I mean, I guess we could do psychological experiments, but you'd also do like surveys, and there's
Mm-hmm.
like a whole variety of them. But like, it's mainly about
Yeah.
psychological experiments relating to affordances and perception that we would need to study
Right. Right.
more.
So do we constitute it to like some kind of pleasure pain dichotomy? Like how would it like what would the
Well, then
fMRIs or like
I
any of
don't know if the
yeah.
scientists find that like a pleasure pain economy is going to be the best description to
Mm.
show how they constitute it, that's fine, right? But like,
What
keep in
what would
mind,
form the criteria?
I don't think that's going to be the case, right? I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case because of the naive realist requirement for perception, right? So when you say something like, oh well, the actual story about how moral knowledge is constituted is going to be purely just facts about my own brain states, well then I
Okay.
obviously would think that's going to be false, right? It's going to require more than just facts about our brain states, because perceptual states require
Yeah.
more than just brain states to be
Right. Yeah,
perceptual.
because it would just be descriptive. It would just be saying that this neuron fired at this
Well,
time
no,
and
no, no,
this
no, no,
this
no, 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 no. I
person
don't
in the
think you
brain
can.
did this.
Look, when I'm saying something like, let's say I give you a story about perception, right? And I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be in a perceptual state is the fact that I have a certain kind of brain state, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be an kind of internal way of conceiving of our own perceptual state, like an internalist way of perceiving of our own
Okay.
perceptual states. But we might have the case where we have the view where perceptual states are constituted by brain states and the objects that are being perceived, right? Those
Yeah.
are going to be the kind of that's where what it means, right? It's going to mean the fact that I have this brain state and there's an object, and my brain state was successful at perceiving some constituent object,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then what I'm talking about perception, I'm talking about in the second sense. I'm talking about the externalist sense, right? So when we're having moral perceptions, right, since I require some external content in order for it to be a perception at all, right, then I think
Yeah. So when you're saying moral perception question there, right? Like the thing is that that's the thing in question. Are there moral perceptions? And we say that
well,
the
I can
moral
give cases.
perceptions
It
are
seems
one-to-one
incredibly, it seems
correspondent to
prima facie very implausible to me
action.
that we have no moral perceptions, that we don't gain any moral knowledge through perception. Like, even an anti-realist would agree with this, that there's at least like some moral knowledge gained from perception.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Well, it just depends on the nature of the information you're gathering, right? Like you
Well,
could
yeah,
probably
but
gather some.
they would not agree. A lot of anti-realists wouldn't agree with like with naive realism about perception, which is what I accept.
Yeah. Well, if you're debating with me, I guess my personal stance is I'm an ontological deflationist too. So, in my worldview, there's not going to be anything that's interacting with anything else distinct to itself to constitute moral propositions one way or the other. So,
I
yeah, it's
thought you were
gonna
a
it's gonna be
monist.
yeah, existence monus. So I'm gonna so the from my
Well, look, if
perspective,
you're having the second question about like existential monism versus like um about existential monism, then it's less about supporting existential monism to refute like my perceptual theory, and more like motivating a distinct perceptual theory and accounting
correct.
that through existential monism.
Right. So I'm gonna have to get yeah. So that's why it's gonna be harder for me to motivate, like for you to motivate the first premise against me against I guess most anti-realists who are just gonna at least agree that there's objects that interact with one another, at least in a moral correspondence or some kind of other correspondence. So yeah, but so I don't know how much that's gonna appeal to most people's seemings, but I think yeah,
No, it
it's gonna be harder
doesn't.
for me. What's that?
I said, yeah, it doesn't. It puts you off on a bad foot. What I need is more of a motivation of a kind of indirect realist view.
Hmm. Because naive realism still accounting for objects, right? Like still it's talking about distinct entities interacting with one another in a causal, moral, whatever aesthetical, you know, feedback loop. And
All right, True Will,
yeah,
you got your debate.
yeah.